Go sleep in your car. Maybe freezing your ass off will finally teach you what real work looks like. My suitcase hit the snowbank first, then my laptop bag. My father, Richard, stood in the doorway like a judge delivering a sentence, his breath fogging in the middle of a Bozeman blizzard. Behind him, my mother, Patricia, didn't even glance up from her phone. She was busy scrolling through my sister Victoria's Instagram, probably admiring another staged closing that never actually happened. Victoria stood over my father's shoulder, arms folded, wearing that small Victoria smile she'd perfected since high school. The golden child, the investment, the future of the family. And me, I was the disappointment who played with computers. I didn't argue. I didn't remind them who paid the electric bill. I didn't mention the wire scheduled for tomorrow morning. I just stepped forward, picked my laptop out of the snow, brushed off the leather, and looked at my father. Then I smiled. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hurt. It was the smile of a landlord realizing the tenant just violated the lease. He mistook it for surrender. I turned around and walked straight into the whiteout. He thought he was throwing me out. He didn't realize he had just defaulted. Before I tell you how that night unraveled their entire illusion, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Most people in a blizzard look for shelter. I looked for signal, not survival. Access. I didn't drive toward town. I drove past it, past the Motel 6, past the gas station glowing like a weak promise, past the library where I used to sit pretending to job hunt so my parents wouldn't ask questions. I headed straight for the private hangar at Bozeman Yellowstone International. The keypad code still worked. My father thought it opened a gym locker I couldn't afford. The steel door lifted with a slow mechanical hum. Inside sat my real address, a Gulfstream G650. Not rented, not borrowed. Owned through a holding trust with a name that meant nothing to anyone who wasn't looking closely. I stepped inside, shook the snow off my coat, and lowered myself into the leather captain's chair. The cabin smelled like conditioned air and expensive insulation. Silence wrapped around me like insulation from a different world. I opened the laptop my father had thrown into a snowbank 10 minutes earlier. The screen came alive. So did the numbers. While he was yelling about real work, my trading bot had executed 42 trades across 3 exchanges. Net profit for the last hour, $42,187. I didn't smile. Profit isn't emotional. It's confirmation. For 32 years, I had been the ghost in that house, the basement son, the cautionary tale they told relatives at Thanksgiving. Marcus is still figuring things out. Meanwhile, Victoria was the star real estate agent. The closer. The pride of the family. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance. I call it structural necessity. My parents built their identity around one simple equation: she wins, I fail. If that flipped, their entire worldview collapsed. If the kid playing video games was actually running high-frequency fintech infrastructure, generating more hourly revenue than my father made in a year, then they weren't wise, they weren't discerning, they were wrong. And mediocre people will do anything to avoid that realization. So they rejected the data. Not because it was invisible, because it was intolerable. They needed me small to feel competent, so I let them. For 5 years, I operated a shell company, Alpine Management LLC. Every month, it wired $4,500 into my father's construction business account labeled consulting retainer. They thought it was an old client. It was me. I was the reason the mortgage stayed current. I was the reason Victoria leased her Range Rover. They weren't wealthy. They were subscribed to my silence. I checked the scheduled transfer set for tomorrow morning. I hovered over the command line. Asset freeze. Enter. The status indicator turned red. Transfer canceled. The hangar felt heavier, like pressure dropping before a storm breaks something open. They wanted me to learn the value of money. Fine. Lesson 1 begins now. People assume favoritism is about love. It isn't. It's about narrative stability. My parents didn't choose Victoria because she was more talented. They chose her because she was easier to understand. She sold houses. She dressed the part. She posted filtered photos with champagne flutes and closing documents. Her success was visible, tangible, shareable at church. Mine wasn't. Lines of code don't photograph well. Liquidity events don't fit into dinner conversation. So they simplified reality into something they could survive. Victoria builds. Marcus wastes time. That version of the world made them feel competent as parents. Here's the uncomfortable truth about cognitive dissonance when facts threaten identity. The brain doesn't update the belief. It attacks the fact. Every time my income contradicted their assumption, they reframed it. When I bought new hardware, I was irresponsible. When I traveled, I was avoiding adulthood. When money quietly appeared in their accounts, it was luck. Their minds protected their egos by shrinking me. And I cooperated, not out of weakness, out of leverage. You see, if I had announced my numbers 5 years ago, they wouldn't have celebrated, they would have interrogated, they would have demanded proof, control, access. Mediocre people don't want to understand excellence, they want to own it. If they acknowledged my success, it meant 2 devastating admissions. 1, they misjudged me. 2, they overinvested in Victoria. And Victoria wasn't just their daughter, she was their emotional portfolio. All the validation they never earned themselves was parked in her projected success. If she failed, they failed. So, they doubled down. More money into her branding, more praise, more selective blindness. Meanwhile, I became useful only in absence. I paid bills without claiming credit. I absorbed insults without correcting them. I let my father lecture me about real work, while my systems outperformed his entire business before breakfast. Why? Because power without visibility compounds. Every month, that Alpine management wired money. They reinforced the illusion that they were stable. They weren't stable, they were subsidized. There's a psychological comfort in underestimating someone who refuses to defend himself. My silence made them bold. My lack of reaction made them careless. They mistook restraint for incapacity. That's a fatal error in any negotiation. Families built on hierarchy require a fixed loser. It stabilizes the emotional ecosystem. The golden child shines brighter when someone else stands in shadow. Remove the scapegoat, and the system destabilizes. That night in the blizzard, when my father told me to learn real work, he wasn't angry about productivity, he was protecting the narrative. If I left on my terms, they lost the illusion of authority. So, he escalated. He needed me expelled to reassert dominance. What he didn't realize is that dominance requires leverage. And leverage requires liquidity. For 5 years, I allowed them to believe they were independent. I allowed the delusion because it gave me strategic advantage. The moment they removed me physically from the house, they removed the last barrier between me and execution. Here's the part people misunderstand. I didn't freeze the transfer out of spite. I froze it because the experiment was complete. I had data. 5 years of silent funding. 5 years of behavioral observation. 5 years of watching how they allocated resources when they thought it was theirs. And the result was clear. They didn't grow, they inflated, they didn't save, they staged, they didn't build resilience, they built image. When you subsidize dysfunction, dysfunction scales. The asset freeze wasn't revenge, it was exposure. If their stability was real, they would survive without me. If it wasn't, the truth would surface in days. I leaned back in the captain's chair and watched the green numbers cascade across my screen. I wasn't angry. Anger is reactive. This was structural correction. They thought I needed discipline. What they needed was liquidity, and I had just withdrawn it. 2 weeks after the asset freeze, I checked into the presidential suite at the Kimpton Armory, under a holding company name. Not to celebrate. To observe. I left my personal phone on silent in a drawer for 14 days. When I finally turned it over, it vibrated like something alive. 73 unread messages, 12 missed calls, 3 voicemails. The timeline told a story. Day 3 after I left was when the Alpine management transfer usually cleared. That was the day the tone shifted. My mother. Did you change something with the Wi-Fi before you left? The accounts are glitching. Translation money didn't arrive. Day 5. Your father can't pay suppliers. What did you do? Day 7. We know you hacked us. Put it back before this gets legal. I laughed once. Short, dry. They truly believed hacking was more plausible than dependence. In their version of reality, my father was a self-made construction businessman. Victoria was a top-producing agent. I was a basement liability with Wi-Fi access. The alternative that they had been living on my recurring subsidy was psychologically unacceptable. But here's what they didn't know. The Alpine transfers were only one layer. 5 years earlier, when I realized my father's business margins were thin and his spending wasn't disciplined, I built redundancy. North Peak Holdings, an anonymous trust, had quietly purchased the non-performing note on their mortgage 6 months ago. The bank didn't care who bought it. Debt is debt. They just wanted it off their books. My parents received a routine letter stating their mortgage had been transferred to a new servicer. They assumed it was administrative noise. They never read the name. North Peak Holdings. Mine. I hadn't bought it to hurt them. I bought it as insurance. If my father's gambling resurfaced, or Victoria's spending spiraled, I could stabilize the asset without drama, control without confrontation. But when I froze Alpine Management, the mortgage payment scheduled for the first of the month failed, according to the loan agreement. That triggered default. And default transferred leverage. I wasn't just the hidden income stream. I was the secured creditor. I opened my laptop and reviewed the ledger. For 5 years, Alpine wired $4,500 monthly. That's $54,000 annually. $270,000 over half a decade, tax-free to them. Invisible to everyone else. Meanwhile, my father's pension added another $40,000 a year. Victoria claimed 6-figure commissions, on paper. They should have been stable, reserves, savings, buffer. Instead, 3 days without my transfer and they were panicking. That meant one thing. They weren't supplementing income. They were surviving on it. They had built their lifestyle mortgage, Range Rover lease, private school tuition for Victoria's networking circles on a recurring payment labeled consulting. They weren't successful. They were subscribed. And subscriptions can be canceled. I leaned back in the suite's leather chair and stared at the numbers. 5 years of funding, 5 years of insults, 5 years of being told to get a real job. The truth wasn't dramatic. It was arithmetic. They hadn't kicked out a dependent son. They had evicted their primary revenue source. The collapse didn't explode. It unraveled. Slow. Predictable. Mechanical. 3 days after the missed transfer, my father's tone shifted from irritated to sharp. Call me. Now. Day 4. Capital letters. This is not funny. Day 6. Accusation. You accessed the accounts before you left. Fix it. They weren't asking if something was wrong. They were demanding I restore normalcy. Normalcy. In their minds, was money appearing without explanation. By day 7, the word hack showed up. My father texted, we spoke to the bank. There's no breach on their end. That leaves you. My mother followed with a softer version. If this is some kind of emotional reaction, we can talk about it. But don't sabotage your own family. Sabotage. Interesting word. I was watching the sun rise over Main Street from 40 stories up, espresso in hand, when Victoria finally entered the thread. My commission hasn't cleared because Dad can't float payroll. Do you understand what you've done? I checked the MLS database. Victoria hadn't closed a sale in 6 months. There was no commission check pending. She wasn't delayed. She was broke, and without my transfer, my father couldn't pretend otherwise. By day 10, the narrative evolved. Public pressure replaced private threats. I opened Facebook. There it was. A filtered photo of my mother and Victoria from a charity gala last year. Champagne glasses raised. Caption. It's heartbreaking when you give everything to a child and they betray you. Some people bite the hand that feeds them. Praying for our lost son to find integrity. 86 likes. 37 comments. Bridge Club sympathies. Church friends offering prayers. No one knew the hand had stopped feeding because it belonged to me. I didn't respond. Silence compounds interest. Privately, the messages grew frantic. Vendors are threatening to suspend service. The car lease company is calling. We can't make payroll this week. Then came the pivot. If you don't fix this, we'll involve law enforcement. I almost admired the consistency. Their brains rejected the simplest explanation that they were financially dependent. So, they invented a cybercrime. My father preferred believing his son had become a criminal mastermind, rather than accepting he had built a business with no reserves. 3 days without subsidy and the system cracked. That told me everything. They weren't illiquid, they were insolvent. I ran a quick projection model. Without Alpine Management, they had enough cash flow to last 11 days at current burn rate. 14 if they cut discretionary spending. They didn't cut anything. Instead, Victoria posted a new photo in her Range Rover, with the caption, "Grind never stops." The lease payment was due in 5 days. My mother texted again, "This is hurting your sister's reputation." There it was. Not the mortgage, not payroll. Reputation. Image was the priority. Liquidity was assumed. I leaned back and reviewed the red status bar on the canceled transfer. One command had exposed 5 years of artificial stability. The asset freeze wasn't aggressive. It was diagnostic. When a system collapses that quickly, it was never stable, it was supported. And support withdrawn feels like attack to those who relied on it. On day 14, my father sent a final message: "If you don't fix this by tomorrow, you're not welcome back in this family." I read it twice, then deleted the thread. They still thought exclusion was leverage. They hadn't realized yet they were already in default. Ryan flew in on a gray morning that matched his personality. He walked into the presidential suite carrying a worn leather briefcase that looked older than both of us. IRS trained, detail obsessed, socially unimpressed. The only person in my extended family who valued numbers more than narratives. He didn't know about my portfolio until I showed him. I slid the tablet across the table. Liquid assets, trading statements, institutional counterparties. He blinked twice. "Marcus, this is hedge fund scale, I know. You're not just doing well. You're operating at institutional volume, I know." The shock faded quickly, replaced by focus. Ryan was built for postmortems. I handed him two things: access to Alpine Management's back-end servers, authorization to dig into every public and private financial record connected to my father's LLC. "I want everything," I said. "Business, personal, credit lines, debt instruments, vendor history." He nodded. "You think it's worse than liquidity? I know it is." While he dissected the digital trail, I prepared something else. 6 months earlier, North Peak Holdings had purchased the non-performing note on my parents' mortgage. At the time, I called it risk mitigation. Now it was leverage. I opened a new document. Notice of default and intent to accelerate. Cold language. Absolute language. According to the loan agreement, one missed payment triggered acceleration rights. That meant full balance due immediately. For years, my father's voice had filled rooms. Now his name was reduced to distressed borrower. Contracts don't recognize volume, only compliance. The printer hummed steadily behind me. Ryan cleared his throat. "Marcus." I turned. His face wasn't analytical anymore. It was pale. "Your father hasn't paid down principal in 2 years. What? He's been paying interest only. Just enough to prevent foreclosure. Your Alpine transfers didn't go toward equity, they went somewhere else." "Where?" He rotated the laptop toward me. "Styling agencies in Los Angeles, reputation management firms, bot engagement services, luxury auto leasing." It read like a startup burn rate report. "They were building Victoria's brand," Ryan said quietly. "Fake awards, paid press placements, inflated Instagram metrics." I stared at the transfers. $7,500 to a PR firm. $4,200 monthly to a digital growth accelerator. $3,100 recurring to a luxury vehicle lease. They weren't stabilizing the house, Ryan continued. They were funding a performance. Victoria's success wasn't failing. It was fabricated. Every staged closing photo, every top producer plaque, every glowing testimonial, purchased and powered by my money. "Keep going," I said. Ryan hesitated. "There's more." He opened a custodial account file. Grandma's estate, my name on the original paperwork. I felt something shift, not anger. Temperature. "How much?" $28,500. "When?" 3 weeks ago. I leaned forward. "Where did it go?" He clicked another tab. "Wire transfer details, beneficiary Davis Family Trust." "That name mean anything to you?" he asked. "No." Ryan pulled MLS records. 6 months earlier, Victoria had closed a luxury condo sale with buyers named the Davises. 2 weeks after closing, the buyers filed a complaint. Structural water damage concealed, inspection report withheld, potential fraud. They were preparing to escalate to the real estate commission, Ryan said. "If proven, she loses her license." The room felt smaller. "So the custodial withdrawal," Ryan nodded. "Settlement payment. Quiet resolution. Your grandmother's money paid hush compensation to prevent a fraud investigation." My jaw tightened. Signature forged, sloppy, but close enough for a dormant account. My mother, not my father. Patricia. She hadn't just mismanaged, she had stolen. Identity theft, wire fraud, grand larceny. All to protect Victoria's illusion. Ryan leaned back, removing his glasses. "If you report this, she faces federal charges. Your sister's license is permanently revoked." He expected something explosive. He expected me to break. Instead, something aligned. For 32 years, I had been paying an emotional tax to exist in that house. Silence tax, approval tax, utility tax. This was the final invoice. 28 grand, I said quietly. Ryan frowned. You're minimizing it. No. I'm valuing it. I stood and walked toward the window overlooking the snow-covered streets. In corporate contracts, I said, there's something called a termination fee. You pay it to exit early. It hurts. But once it's paid, you're free. Ryan didn't interrupt. They just processed my termination fee for me. He stared. They stole from me. I continued. But in doing so, they removed the last obligation I felt. No more guilt. No more rationalizing. No more. Maybe they'll understand someday. They didn't misunderstand. They engineered. They built a financial ecosystem dependent on illusion and funded by my restraint. And when exposure threatened that illusion, they sacrificed me again, only this time. They left a paper trail. I picked up the foreclosure notice, added the forensic audit, added the wire fraud documentation, layered it like evidence in a trial. You're not calling the police, Ryan said. No. Why not? Because prison gives them a villain, and foreclosure doesn't. Foreclosure gives them math. He understood. Prison is dramatic. Default is humiliating. Prison allows narrative. Debt strips it. I want a kill shot, I said calmly. Define kill shot. I want timing. Ryan glanced at the calendar. They're already stressed. Cash flow negative. Lease payment due. Payroll unstable. Good. And I'll invite them to dinner. Ryan's face tightened. You're going to confront them. No, I said. I'm going to close them. He didn't speak again. He didn't need to. We both knew what forensic accounting really is. It's autopsy. You cut open the ledger, and you find the cause of death. The copper saddle doesn't list prices on the menu. It doesn't need to. If you have to ask, you shouldn't be there. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a booth against the wall. Clear sightlines, one entrance, one exit. Leather binder resting on the table in front of me like a sealed verdict. Sparkling water. No alcohol. I wanted a clear head. They walked in 15 minutes late. Power move, at least. That's what my father thought it was. Richard led, shoulders back, blazer pressed. The same expression he wore when negotiating subcontractor bids. Patricia followed, scanning the room to see who might recognize her. Appearances never clock out. Victoria trailed behind in a cream cashmere coat I knew she couldn't afford. The return tag was still tucked discreetly inside the sleeve. They slid into the booth. No fear. Only irritation mixed with smug relief. They thought I'd folded. Well, my father said, picking up the wine list without acknowledging me. I see you've come to your senses. He ordered a 2015 Cabernet without checking the price. And we'll start with the seafood tower, he added, glancing at me. We're willing to move past your little episode. Patricia leaned in, voice soft and rehearsed. Sweetheart, we understand you've been emotional. Living in your car must have been clarifying. Victoria didn't speak. She just scrolled her phone, pretending not to care. Waiting. Probably. For a commission notification that didn't exist. I let them order. Appetizers stacked up. Oysters, Wagyu sliders, lobster tails. $400 before the entrees. They were eating like liquidity had returned. It hadn't. When the plates were cleared, my father leaned back and finally looked at me. Let's hear this proposal, he said. And make it quick. Victoria has showings tomorrow. I took a sip of water. Set the glass down carefully. My proposal, I said evenly, is a timeline. I slid the leather binder across the table. He opened it casually. The first page wasn't an apology. It was the notice of default and intent to accelerate. North Peak Holdings listed as secured creditor. His eyes narrowed. What is this? Turn the page. He did. Forensic audit summary. Highlighted transfers. 5 years of Alpine management deposits. Then the custodial withdrawal. $28,500. Beneficiary Davis Family Trust. Patricia inhaled sharply. She recognized the account number. Victoria leaned forward. What is this supposed to prove? Keep turning. The final document rested underneath. My 2024 federal tax return. Adjusted gross income circled in red ink. $19,542,000. Silence fell over the table. Not awkward silence. Vacuum silence. The kind that pulls oxygen out of a room. Richard blinked at the number. That's fake. It's filed with the IRS. He flipped pages again like the numbers might rearrange themselves. Victoria's mouth parted slightly. You, she whispered. I leaned forward. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't change my tone. For 2 weeks, I said, you accused me of hacking your accounts. Patricia's hands were shaking. You disrupted our business, she said weakly. I held her gaze. I didn't hack your accounts. I let the pause sit. I was your account. Richard's face shifted from red to gray. Every mortgage payment, I continued. Every lease payment on the Range Rover. Every consulting retainer. That was me. Victoria shook her head. No. Dad built his company. Dad hasn't paid principal on the house in 2 years. Richard stiffened. That's interest only. Just enough to stall foreclosure. I tapped the custodial account document, and when your staged real estate empire collapsed under fraud exposure, Mom forged my signature and used Grandma's inheritance to pay hush money. Patricia's composure cracked. Marcus. Please. We did what we had to do. For her, I said, nodding toward Victoria. Victoria slammed her hand on the table. You think you're better than us because you sit behind a screen? No, I said calmly. I think I'm solvent. The waiter approached cautiously with the check presenter. Richard waved him away. Not now. I stood. Slow. Controlled. You have 30 days, I said. The mortgage note was sold 6 months ago. Richard laughed nervously. To who I looked at him. North Peak Holdings. Patricia's eyes widened. That's mine. The realization landed. They hadn't been negotiating with a bank. They had been negotiating with me. If you're not out by the 1st, I continued, the sheriff will remove you. Victoria grabbed my sleeve. You can't do this. I have a reputation in this town. I gently removed her hand. You don't have a reputation. You have liabilities. Patricia began crying openly. We're family. No, I said. We were a subscription. Richard's voice dropped lower. You'd throw us on the street. You already tested that strategy. He didn't respond. Because he remembered the blizzard. I placed a crisp $100 bill beside my untouched water. That covers my drink and the tip. I looked at the seafood tower remains. The empty wine bottle. The illusion. Enjoy the dinner, I said. You're paying for this one. I walked toward the exit. Behind me, chairs shifted. Patricia whispering. Victoria panicking. Richard demanding the check. I didn't turn around. The cold air outside hit clean. Sharp. Honest. Inside, the bill would arrive. Cards would decline. Reality would present itself in printed ink. Foreclosure isn't loud. It's procedural. And procedure doesn't argue. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed. A notification from my system's dashboard. Markets closing. Green across the board. I didn't feel triumph. I felt balance. They had spent 5 years inflating a lie. Tonight, I called it due. They didn't leave voluntarily. They tried denial first. 3 days after dinner, my father sent a certified letter claiming the foreclosure notice was fraudulent. He CC'd an attorney whose website looked like it hadn't been updated since 2009. North Peak Holdings responded within 48 hours. Documentation. Original note transfer. Recorded deed of trust. Missed payment. Acceleration clause. Math. Law doesn't argue tone. It enforces sequence. Patricia called next. Blocked number. I let it ring. Then a voicemail. Marcus, we can fix this. We'll sell the house ourselves. Just give us time. Don't humiliate your father like this. Humiliate. Interesting choice of word. Foreclosure isn't humiliation. It's consequence. Victoria tried a different angle. Text message. If you do this, you destroy me. No broker will work with me. I typed one sentence back. You destroyed yourself. Then, I blocked her. The official notice posted on their front door 2 weeks later. Default cured period expired. 30 days to vacate. My father didn't pack until the sheriff's deputy scheduled the enforcement date. Even then, he told neighbors it was a temporary restructuring. Image preservation until the last possible second. The Range Rover disappeared first. Repossessed. Victoria's showings stopped entirely. No new listings, no new posts. Her Instagram went quiet. Performance requires funding. Patricia attempted one final appeal. She drove to the Kimpton unannounced. Front desk called my suite. There's a woman here insisting she's your mother. I told them to send her away. No scene, no closure, just refusal. On enforcement day, I didn't attend. I didn't need to. The deputy's report was clinical. Property secured. Occupants removed. Locks changed. Inventory noted. The house was empty by sunset when I walked through it 2 days later. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt smaller. Staged furniture gone. Echoes where noise used to be. 5 years of subsidy stripped back to drywall and debt. I didn't gloat. I didn't rescue. I listed the property under North Peak Holdings and sold it within a month. Market value, clean exit, no sentimental discount, no family clause. Some people think revenge requires shouting. It doesn't. It requires follow-through. They told me to learn the value of real work, so I applied it. Contracts executed, assets liquidated, accounts closed, no negotiation, no forgiveness clause. Family is not immunity from consequence, and I wasn't interested in rehabilitation. I was interested in termination. The fallout wasn't explosive. It was erosion. Victoria filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy 3 weeks after the foreclosure finalized. In a town like Bozeman, that kind of filing travels faster than gossip. Brokers talk, lenders talk. Real reputation depends on creditworthiness. Her license wasn't revoked, but it didn't matter. No serious client hires an agent whose own finances collapsed under public record. The Range Rover was repossessed from the driveway of a short-term rental she'd been hiding in. Someone recorded it. The clip circulated locally for a week before fading into the next distraction. She deleted half her Instagram posts, then the rest. Without paid engagement, her audience evaporated. Performance without funding looks different. My father took on smaller construction contracts after losing the house. No more commercial bids, no more chest-out negotiations in upscale restaurants. He downsized tools, sold equipment, moved into a 2-bedroom rental on the edge of town where parking is shared and privacy is thin. It wasn't a bad place, it was adequate. But adequacy feels like exile when your identity was built on appearing powerful. Patricia stopped hosting charity events. Bridge club invitations slowed. People didn't confront her directly. They just adjusted their tone. Wealthy friends prefer distance from financial instability. It's contagious in perception, if not in fact. Their social circle contracted, not dramatically, gradually. No one wants proximity to collapse. I didn't monitor them daily. I heard updates indirectly. Public records, occasional industry chatter. Once, a blocked voicemail slipped through. My father's voice sounded smaller. Not angry, not commanding. Just tired. I deleted it without finishing. Closure doesn't require participation. I relocated fully to the ranch in the Bridger Mountains. 80 acres, private road. Fiber line installed directly to a server room I built beneath the main floor. From my office window, there's nothing artificial in sight. No staged success, no curated applause. Just tree line, snow, and distance. Markets still open every morning. Algorithms still execute without emotion. Green numbers cascade across black screens. Consistent. Objective. Unlike family narratives, people sometimes ask if I regret not helping them rebuild. If I could have restored the transfers conditionally. Forced therapy. Structured repayment plans. But intervention only works when accountability exists. They didn't want correction. They wanted restoration of illusion. And illusion is expensive. I funded it once. I won't fund it again. The world didn't end for them. It recalibrated. Smaller house, smaller influence, smaller noise. They're alive. They're functional. They're just ordinary now. And for people who built identity on superiority, ordinary feels catastrophic. People assume the victory was the foreclosure. It wasn't. The dinner wasn't the victory either. Neither was the tax return sliding across the table like a blade. The real shift happened earlier. It happened the moment I understood something simple. You cannot outwork a narrative someone is committed to protecting. For most of my life, I believed success would correct perception. That, if I built enough, earned enough, proved enough, eventually my parents would be forced to update their view of me. That's the trap. Achievement does not cure insecurity in other people. It threatens it. My parents didn't misunderstand me because they lacked information. They misunderstood me because understanding me would have required dismantling themselves. If they admitted I was successful, then they misjudged me for decades. If they admitted Victoria was manufactured, then they had poured their emotional capital into a failing asset, so their minds did what most fragile systems do. They rejected disruptive data, and I kept trying to feed that system, not publicly, not loudly, but financially. I told myself I was being strategic. That silent leverage was smarter than confrontation, but beneath the strategy was something else. Hope. Hope that one day they would look at me and see competence instead of inconvenience. Hope that, if I stabilized their world, They would stabilize their treatment of me. That hope was expensive. More expensive than the $270,000 in transfers. More expensive than the $28,500 they stole. Hope keeps you negotiating with people who already decided the outcome. When my mother forged my signature and drained the custodial account, something clarified. Not emotionally, structurally. They didn't just fail me. They priced me. They calculated that protecting Victoria's illusion was worth more than my trust. Once someone assigns you a transactional value, the relationship is already commercial, and commercial relationships end when the contract expires. That theft was my termination fee. It hurt for about 5 minutes. Then, it freed me. Here's the concept that changed everything for me. I call it the vacuum of validation. Most people stay trapped because they keep filling space, arguing, explaining, sending proof. Trying again, they keep pouring effort into a container that refuses to empty itself of bias. But when you withdraw completely, no argument, no money, no reaction, no explanation, you create a vacuum, and vacuums are uncomfortable. Silence forces reflection in ways confrontation never can. When I stopped paying, stopped defending, stopped participating, my parents were left alone with the consequences of their own structure. No scapegoat, no subsidy. No narrative villain to blame long-term. Just math. People ask why I didn't fix them once I had leverage. Why not condition assistance on therapy? Why not rebuild with boundaries? Because that still centers them. It still implies their approval matters. The highest form of detachment isn't punishment, it's indifference. I didn't need them to apologize. I didn't need them to suffer dramatically. I needed them irrelevant. There's a difference between winning and leaving. Winning keeps you tied to the opponent. Leaving ends the game. Out here in the mountains, the snow falls without audience. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't argue with the trees. It just lands, settles, and reshapes the landscape quietly. My life now feels like that. Not loud, not performative, clean. Markets open. Systems run. Revenue compounds. No one in the next room questioning whether it's real work. No one measuring my worth against someone else's curated image. Just signal. Just execution. If you're listening to this, and you're still trying to convince someone who benefits from misunderstanding you, stop. If you're still paying emotional rent to live in a narrative that shrinks you, stop. Success isn't proving them wrong. It's building somewhere they can't reach. Let them underestimate you. Let them laugh at your computer games. Let them believe you're lost. The quietest person in the room is often the one holding the keys. And sometimes the strongest move isn't exposing the lie. It's withdrawing the supply that keeps it alive. I don't feel happy. Happiness fluctuates. I feel precise. And precision is freedom. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing and dropping a comment. I read more than you think. This content was created by an AI-assisted team for entertainment purposes only. Do not replicate any actions described.